Second. Hi, I'm Brian Brady, and I'm here today to talk about Ukraine with with a few experts on Ukraine. Former Congressman David Bonior, and two folks living and working and fighting in Ukraine, Emily Rutkowski and Andrew Bailey. Emily, did I say your last name correctly?
Yeah.
I did. Um, Great to have you all here. I know this is not an easy topic to talk about, but David and I are taking a trip to Ukraine in 2 weeks, and we wanted to talk to some experts on Ukraine. I wanted to interview David about the purpose of his delegation to Ukraine. So I'll start with the congressman. David, why is Ukraine such a big cause for you, and what do you hope to gain on this trip to Ukraine?
I come from a Ukrainian family and a Ukrainian American background. My grandfather was born in Western Ukraine and came to the United States in 1912. And we grew up in a Ukrainian community, Hamtramck, Michigan. I spent time with my grandfather in the cultural center, at the churches. I took him to picnics, Ukrainian picnics. So I was exposed to a lot of Ukrainian culture. And so I have followed Ukraine throughout my political career, have been active in it in the United States Congress on the Holodomor resolution. This is the great famine that killed 4 million Ukrainians, Stalin's orders to starve Ukrainians back in 1932 and 33. And other issues. I've worked on Ukrainian issues. So I'm familiar with Ukraine. I've been there before. In fact, we were there last year. I took a group of 4 or 5 people with me. And our purpose then was to talk to refugees and to talk to the caregivers, who were quite heroic, both. And it was a fabulous trip in terms of what we were able to garner. And the idea was we would go, we would interview people, we would talk to people, we would learn about this, we would listen, basically. We were there to bear witness to their suffering and their caregiving, and then come back and write about it. And it yielded about a dozen pieces in national publications in the last year. That's what I and Father Daly have written. And then in addition to that, it provided me the information to go back up on Capitol Hill and talk to my colleagues on why it's important to support Ukraine, because they're on the front line right now. They're not only fighting for themselves and for their country, they're fighting for us as well. Because if they fall, the next country that is going to be challenged will be a NATO country. And then we have, by treaty obligations, a responsibility to send our soldiers there as well. So we're trying to get this point across to as many people as we can. And I think we were making progress on it. And this second trip that we're taking, Brian, I, Father Daly, Dr. Trupin, and Bob Wood will be going with us. He's a professor at Ukrainian Catholic University. And Emily will be on part of it. The idea of it is to look at some other dimensions of Ukraine, and that is mental health, children. What has trauma done to combatants and to children, and how can we partner to be helpful in trying to deal with this terrible scourge, this mental scourge that has occurred? Yeah, I saw a statistic recently from the World Health Organization that in the United States, Canada, Great Britain, France, we're talking about mental health diseases of maybe 5 to 6% of the population. In Ukraine, they think it's 25% and rising right now. And if you're there and you're dealing with sirens, and your kids are dealing with sirens, and you're bringing them down into the shelters or the basements time after time during the day, and they're confronted with the loss of their father or their mother, because we have 50,000 women fighting in the Ukrainian army as well. It's pretty traumatic. It's pretty difficult. And of course, there are those who have been maimed and had their lives cut short and gave the total sacrifice. And so we want to come back and write about that and what's happening. And we want to write about the courage and the courageous fight that the Ukrainians are engaged in order to save their country and their democracy. Democracy is the other piece. And we're having challenges with our own democracy here in the United States. But they're having a challenge in the sense that they're being invaded by one of the most powerful militaries in the history of the world. And they're doing an incredible job. Basically, it's pretty much at a standstill as we're speaking right now, but I could spend time here and iterate and talk to you about all the different victories the Ukrainians have had over the Soviets, over the Russians over the past 2 years. So anyway, this is a fight that's been going on in Ukraine now since 2014, 10 years, if you look at what's happened in the East. So that's why I'm interested. That's why we're going. And we hope to get the knowledge to come back and share it with the American people from the perspective of someone who's not in government now, but who's bearing witness as an interested party.
Thanks, David. And it's an honor to go on this trip with you. And you and I have worked to strengthen democracy here at home through our work on the MICFA Challenge and you on a million other causes.
Tell them what our motto is in the MICFA Challenge.
Democracy is a verb. So
you have to practice it. It's not something that's just on paper or in an academic book. I mean, if you want democracy to work, you got to go out and do something. And in Ukraine, they're not only going out and doing something, they're going out and giving their lives for this. And it's something we want to be there for them.
In the Emily and Andrew are our democracy as a verb. Live that to the fullest here because they've been fully active in this, and they're also the cause. They have an organization called Misha's Angels, which will be the group we're fundraising for while we're in Ukraine. And Emily and Andrew wanted to take some time to get to know you both and how you both ended up in. I know you're in Michigan today, but you'll both be in. Andrew, you're going back to Ukraine, and Emily, you spent the past couple of years there, but. Let's just one at a time get to know you both a little bit. And Emily, I'll start with you. You're an attorney, right? And you give us a little bit of your background and how you ended up in Ukraine and being such a passionate advocate for Ukraine.
Yeah, actually, we're actually in Kyiv right now.
Oh, you're in Kyiv? Okay, I'm sorry. Surprise. Good correction. You were in Michigan a few weeks ago, yes.
Yes. So I'm from Michigan. My background is pretty similar to David's. My family is Polish and Ukrainian, and my grandma was a cook at the Polish club in Detroit for about 30 years. And so I kind of grew up around Polish and Ukrainian culture. I went to Michigan State for undergrad and I majored in international relations and Arabic. And then I went to law school at U of M and I practiced at a big firm in California, international law for about three years. And then I came back to Michigan shortly before COVID. I was helping take care of my grandma. And then the full-scale invasion came shortly kind of after she had passed away. And I immediately got involved with an organization in Michigan called the Ukrainian American Crisis Response Committee, or CRC for short. And we did a lot of, at the beginning, it was kind of all over the place. We fundraised for IFACs, which are the individual first aid kits for soldiers, and we had packed them and we shipped them out to Ukraine. We were actually Rosalind, Detroit for a little bit as well, which is a big organization in the States. And then we also did a lot of advocacy work. We are proud to say we were the first state out of all 50 states that had relationships with all of our congressional members. We had, at the time, 14 Congress members and 2 senators. And so, yeah, we were a founding member of the American Coalition for Ukraine. And that's actually how I got involved and how I met David. They put on, I think they've actually expanded to about 90 organizations now, but twice a year they put on a conference in DC. And that's where I met Andrew at last year as well. But I would say by summer of 2022, so within 6 months of the war, I think that war fatigue had already kind of started to set in then, and it was harder and harder to get people motivated to care about the war. And so I really wanted to come to Ukraine and kind of see things for myself. So I came for the first time in the fall and winter of 2022, and I was in Lviv and Kyiv. And actually, that was still at the time where it was like, okay, Western Ukraine's okay, but don't go any further, because Kyiv, I don't think they had the Patriots yet, so there was still a lot of blackouts, a lot of water outages, and like a lot of strikes. So it was kind of a lot more volatile in Kyiv at the time. And then when I was here, I think what really struck me was you see soldiers everywhere, and like they range in age. I mean, you see like 17, 18-year-old kids, and then you see men in their 70s who want to fight and protect their country. And so I really wanted to get more involved in really focusing work on soldiers, because they're the ones that are protecting Ukraine. And I mean, now we're sitting in Kyiv, and it's a completely different feel than when I came here the first time. And really, like, the only reason that the city is safe and that you can have a relatively normal life here now is because of the soldiers. And so I think it's really important to remember that. And so that's kind of what I did. And then when I came back to the States, I had decided that I wanted to go back to Ukraine. So when I went to DC in April of last year, we met a mutual friend who was actually with the organization that Andrew was with in Seattle, and he had worked. He was in the international region in Ukraine, and he had worked with an organization here. So I had come to Ukraine in June, and I was with a fund, kind of fundraising and procuring supplies for soldiers. And then Andrew was enlisted with the Ukrainian Marines, and so they needed a bunch of gear when they were kind of preparing for things. And so I couldn't really do that with the fund that I was at. So I sort of broke away and started fundraising on my own with a couple friends. And so that's what we've been doing right now. Yeah.
So you've been in Kyiv for on and off for since 2022?
Yeah.
And wow, that's an incredible story, though, to go from sort of taking care of your grandmother in Michigan and being a lawyer to suddenly you're pretty close to the front lines with your boyfriend Andrew, who is also really on the front lines and training soldiers. And so, Andrew, I'd love to hear your story of how you ended up in the Ukraine and why this means so much to you.
I can't follow that. That's a great story. Sure. So I was in the United States Marines for about 5 years. I did Afghanistan twice. I got wounded on my last tour and was retired. And then I kind of did your typical veteran on the loose back into the public population, general pop. And I did school for 2 years, and then I kind of did some traveling, figure yourself out. And COVID, as we all know, happened. And then the invasion happened, the full-scale invasion, and you see it in every conflict. Everybody goes to the beer hall and everybody talks about how they can win the war, how if they were in charge, they can win this war if they were only just listen to their opinions. And I've never really been a fan of that. I'm more of if there's a problem, let's go take care of it. Let's go do this. And so I decided that I wanted to get more directly involved, and I wasn't sure at the time in what capacity I wanted to help Ukraine. And so it started with the same organization, or the organization in Seattle that Emily had connections with, of fundraising, putting events on that could facilitate, what are those blind auctions, I think they're called, or something like that. Anyways, just fundraising in general. I'm sorry. I'm rambling. And then that kind of spurred into the opportunity to go to Ukraine, to go do something that's within my skill set, which is instructing. Mm-hmm. And so I came over to Ukraine and started instructing Ukrainian military in small unit tactics. So think about, I don't know, patrolling and shooting and moving and throwing grenades and that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. That was kind of my bread and butter. So I spent 6 months training the Ukrainian military with an organization. And then I decided that I should probably see if my training's any good. So I switched from being an instructor to now being a fighter here in Ukraine. So that's kind of my progression. I tend to put my foot in my mouth when I'm in the sales chair. So I figured I'd just kind of stick to my lane, which is blowing stuff up.
Yeah, thanks for your service, Andrew. It takes a lot
Sure.
of courage and commitment to really put your life on the line. And I know via Emily that you've lost a lot of friends already who you've
Yeah.
trained and worked with. So there's nothing easy about war, even for it. And so we don't need to package and sanitize it too much here. I think
Sure.
people understand that. The next step here, you have, obviously in Congress right now, we're held up on this Ukraine aid package. And so support for independent causes that provide resources to the soldiers and to the citizens mean more than ever, right? So Emily, tell us about your organization, Misha's Angels, and what it does and how we can get involved.
Yeah, so Misha's Angels, we do the same thing that a lot of organizations do, which are procure supplies for soldiers and deliver them. So actually the training organization that Andrew was with is Sabre, and you guys will actually meet them when you're here. But they train a lot of units that aren't really getting a lot of support from larger organizations. So Misha's Angels has also been providing supplies to different units that they trained. We did some IFACs for Valentine's Day, the first aid kits for a couple of the units that they trained. And then we've also helped get night vision for one of them. And we've done a lot of medical supplies. And actually right now we've been getting a lot of requests for a ton of medical supplies, which for a while it was a little bit quieter, but everything is sort of picked up again with that, especially after Avdiivka. So everybody is resupplying with IFACs and different kind of supplies. And also like wound care is another big issue right now too. So a couple of the medics have requested wound care supplies. So we brought over, when I came, I brought a couple suitcases full of I'm not in the medical profession, so I do not know what they all are, but I know like wound dressings and stuff that came from the hospital with like the IFAC supplies. I know about all the IFAC supplies, but kind of the when we get to like the more medical
the continued care type
Yeah.
type equipment that goes into prolonged aid and stuff like that. It's like I'm looking at a barrel of monkeys. I don't know what I'm looking at, but there are many, like I said, the hunger out here for medical supplies is insatiable. So finding someone to take it is not going to be a problem. It's just, again, working those connections and finding who it needs to go to in order to be utilized appropriately.
And my dad was in Vietnam, so he had helped me like go through. People donated a bunch of supplies, and so he helped me go through and kind of say, okay, this is what the combat medics would use, and then we take pictures of it and say like, do you need this? And they're like, yes, and so then we bring it over. But yeah, so
never have we really ever gotten a no, to be honest. So
no,
There's there's definitely need.
Yeah.
And I know you've raised about $65,000 already when you were back in Michigan for some of this. Show us, I think you have a couple of the items with you. Do you want to show a couple of the items you have that you've been fundraising for?
Yeah, this is a big one. So I actually was back in Michigan around Christmas time, and there's an amazing group in the UP in Michigan called Weepers for Ukraine, and they raised over $5,000 for medical supplies and IFACs. We did a couple events up there, but Andrew can show you.
So this is, we all hear the word or the acronym IFAC. Essentially, just think of it as a first aid kit for the battlefield. That's all it is. Its main job is essentially when there is a wounded Ukrainian soldier or volunteer fighter out on the front line, that the idea is for every soldier to have one of these. And it will have the components in it in order to save that soldier's life or stabilize them until someone in the medical field, aka a medic, is able to get to that wounded and take him off of the line and render higher echelons of care in regards to what kind of injury he has. But this is pretty much just at the end of the day, blood loss is the number one killer. So a lot of the components within this IFAC are to stop traumatic hemorrhages. And the biggest one is a tourniquet. And essentially this just goes on a limb and you just cinch it down. Think about putting a stick through some string and twisting it, and it gets as tight as it can, and basically that will pinch an artery. Because you're not really going to bleed out, and I won't get too visceral here.
Yeah.
You're not really going to die if it's a flesh wound.
Mm-hmm.
People die from blood loss if it hits the highways, the arteries. That's what happens.
Yeah.
And a tourniquet is the cheapest and easiest thing to train in, actually, to render aid to people who are wounded in that sort of regard.
And also, just to go on again about tourniquets too, tourniquets also, the other issue with tourniquets is there's a lot of fake tourniquets out there. And so the only tourniquets that we use in our IFACs, cat tourniquets are the official tourniquet of the US Army. They're also the most expensive tourniquet at about $28.
Yeah.
And then there's also Dnipro tourniquets, which are a Ukrainian made tourniquet that have very good reviews and medics like them. So that's another tourniquet that we will use. But there's a lot of cheap Chinese knockoff tourniquets out there. And so sometimes people will like give us donations and we can't use them other than for training because it's very dangerous to use a knockoff tourniquet.
So these are actually the Dnipro tourniquets produced here in Ukraine, and cost-wise, you can get a lot more of them. And they just went through basically a revamp, or what you might call basically addressing problems or concerns that came in through the first iteration of this. They redesigned and are now producing this. This is a great way to get more tourniquets out to soldiers who need it for less money, basically stretching your pennies without having to buy cat tourniquets, and they are fairly reliable.
Very reliable.
Well,
Yeah. So
you have
I
a
think
couple
this,
other. That sounds like a great way to save lives is just getting medical care. You also have some things like you had a Star Wars weapon, a drone jammer.
Okay.
I thought I saw.
Yeah. Let's so pretty much anyways, there are a bunch of tools in this thing for many different types of wounds and injuries that might happen, and it's all in here, and these are very much needed for the Ukrainians out on the front. You want me to take the Star Wars gun?
Yes.
Okay.
This keeps you from having to get injured. Yeah.
This is a drone jammer. So I will address the importance of, or let me rephrase. Sorry. We all know, due to the news and media and just the information that's out there, just how shockingly and surprisingly prevalent drones are in this war, right? Drones have now made a tank that costs $75,000 to manufacture or troop transport irrelevant because you can blow it up with a $750 drone all willy-nilly. Yeah. So it's really changed the dynamic of warfare and will continue to. It also, the more important part is the fact that no one is really able to go unwatched in this war. Drones are more prevalent in the sky than birds at this point. The reason, for instance, let's take example the summer offensive that didn't get the reviews that it should have, right? Didn't go how everyone thought it would go. That is simply because the Russians were able to watch everything that the Ukrainians were doing. No one is really able to clump troops up together like you would in a traditional conflict without constant surveillance in order to consolidate forces to then push the line and hopefully have a breakthrough. That's not possible unless you have anti-drone measures, which basically will give you I know I'm using really, slick military terminology here, but it's no one is able to have the operational space that they need in order to do what is needed to win this war. If you don't have those anti-drone measures, you cannot organize, you cannot facilitate a actual proper offense. This drone jammer is one of those tools that then it essentially it causes the drone to pass out. You will point it at the drone. It will emit a megahertz on a frequency in which the drone operates. It will cause the drone to essentially have a nosebleed and pass out. It will fall from the sky. And if you get enough drones, that gives you what I was talking about, that operational space in order to then be able to send out a platoon or send out some tanks or something like that, and the Russians will be on the back foot because they can't watch, they can't observe, they can't feed their defensive positions that information. So assets like this are instrumental, not only in this war but any war going forward. You're going to have something like this with the U.S. platoons, with the U.S. fire teams. Someone's going to have this equivalent because it is now mandatory. One of the big things about it, though, is it's a little bit more expensive than this guy. It's bankrupting this country just to feed the amount of soldiers they have, let alone buy enough anti-drone equipment to be able to have them operate safely. So it takes a lot of.
What is the price tag? What is the price tag, Andrew? Is it a couple $1,000s? What do those cost?
What do you want me to say?
It's about
10,000.
This one's 22,000 actually for this little tiny jammer.
So if you're watching and you have 22,000, which a few people do, you could buy one drone jammer.
Exactly.
Yes. David, we'll make some personal calls on the drone jammers here.
Yeah, please do. There are a lot of Ukrainian-based companies that manufacture anti-drone guns, drone jammers.
This one actually, though, just to kind of go in and like why we got this one. So with a lot of different equipment, you have like a range of prices. Like, I mean, you could probably get a jammer for around $3,000 to $4,000, but you kind of get what you pay for. And we actually know a few drone experts who you guys will also meet when you're here. But I kind of consult them for everything because I don't have a military background. So anytime we need to purchase something, I have my little sounding board to make sure like, is this the right thing to purchase? And a lot of like the cheaper items, they just don't work. And this one has been used by the US before, so it's pretty good.
It's a good one.
It's a solid. Show us one more. I know we're going to see you and interview you more when we're there in person with you all, or at least we'll see Emily, because I think Andrew will be off defending the country. Show us one more item here, because I know we're running out of time, but I'd love to see one more thing you're fundraising for.
So, as we all know, or as you know, the information is out there. Ukraine is now the most heavily mined country in the world, and this is essentially just a minesweeper. It's a military-grade minesweeper. It's the same brand, I think, or style of minesweeper I used in Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, we also had mines by a different name, IEDs. That were just everywhere. There was as many ants in Afghanistan as there were IEDs. And so, this piece of equipment is what I used in Afghanistan. It's what I use here in Ukraine, and it is phenomenal. So essentially equipment like this, it doesn't have the price tag of an anti-drone gun or a drone jammer, but it keeps Ukrainians alive, and it is necessary for them to go on their patrols, be it security, be it offensive, be it defensive patrols, because there's just so many mines out here. The Russians have mines in number the same way they have artillery rounds in number, and so they just scatter them everywhere that they possibly can. So it's almost impossible to be able to conduct operations without something like this.
And to help, I'm going to put this in the postings what I do wherever I post this, but tell us just, Emily, where we can make donations to help you supply with these items.
So we have there's a couple different ways. One of them is through the easiest way is through PayPal or through Zelle, or checks in the United States can be mailed. And that's for Misha's Angels. And then Misha's Angels is not a 501c3, but we do have a 501c3 sister company, Aerial Relief Group. And so if anybody needs a tax deductible donation, it can be made on their website, and then we can use the funds.
Great. I'll post this all below the video for folks. And then, yes.
Oh no, I was just gonna say one other thing about Misha's Angels that's a little bit different than some of like the larger organizations because there are countless aid groups in Ukraine and they're all very much needed. But one thing that we're all volunteers, and so we actually don't have any overhead costs at all. And so 100% of donations go for equipment. We don't take anything out of it, and we also deliver things directly to soldiers and to people that we know. And so I know some people, are concerned about corruption and if things are actually getting there, and it's a very valid concern. And of course, like anywhere in the world, there is some of that in Ukraine. But everybody that we give supplies to, we personally know them, and so we know that they are getting where they need to go, and we show everybody that the items have been delivered.
Yeah, and I think that's part of why we're doing this video. Is I think there's to know who the people are donating to. I think will help David and I make asks of people and meeting you too, and hearing about your passion for protecting Ukraine and helping it beat back Russian aggression is powerful. David, quick question for you is, we're a country and a globe and a population with empathy fatigue because we have struggles in not just Ukraine, we have it in Gaza, in the Congo, in multiple places around the world. Why is it close to your heart, and why do you think this is important for us to fight back against empathy fatigue and actually lean into causes around the world like Ukraine?
Well, because we have a lot to protect. We want to protect the democracies that we have, and we want to expand into democracy those places that people are struggling to have democracy, like they are in Ukraine. So they have it there, and now they're trying to keep it. But it was a struggle for them to get it in the first place, as you know. So that's why it's important, and we want a more saner world that will respect human rights, that will respect boundaries of countries, that will work to clear up all these mines that we've just been talking about around the globe. There was a great organization that came together, a couple decades ago, won the Nobel Peace Prize. They were actually, Andrew, veterans. The Vietnam Veterans of America were a big part of doing that. And they put together an organization to basically mine by law these make it legal, these mines. And so, it has worked and it hasn't worked, and we have to support countries and individuals in countries who are working towards a more democratic and a free society, and so we can expand the peace olive, the peace leaf throughout the world.
I also very much agree with that. As we've seen with the war in Ukraine, it really only takes one sociopath with a gilded throne in a city called Moscow to throw a wrench in democracy. And I'll basically start by saying that democracy is like a member of Mensa with ADHD. We're kind of bad in the long game, but we're fantastic scramblers. But we're up against an enemy that is a one-party system under a totalitarian regime. So in terms of playing the long game, he has the advantage in terms of continued support. So continuing these meetings, continually getting the word out, exposure to the conflict every day. I know fatigue is very much a real thing, but there are ways to combat that. As long as we stay consistent in promoting this message to fight tyranny, to spread democracy, and to ensure our allies' abilities to choose and how they want to govern themselves, whatever choice that might be, but they deserve the right and they are required to have the right to do that. So I just want to illustrate that we have to keep these messages up. We have to keep support up, and there are ways around fatigue. And there are many, many great people out there who are willing to support this cause. And
that's one of the reasons we're going on this trip, to your point, Andrew, is to bear witness to these stories of heroism and resilience and toughness and standing up to the Russians. I mean, Putin has said that he's a war criminal, as we all know. He has said that basically the West will cave. They don't have the resilience. They don't have the toughness. They won't last it. We'll outlast them.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge.
Yeah.
And,
Emily,
yeah.
I'm going to let Emily get the last word here too, because
Sure.
so we're not too male heavy on our comments. But Emily, how do you fight? You had some success with getting folks in Michigan to contribute to Misha's Angels, and what's your message about combating this empathy fatigue that folks get?
Yeah, I think you know, really like I think when you kind of share stories and when you kind of show, especially showing people IFACs, it's one thing to kind of hear about the war and everything, but when you sort of see and get to like touch and hold these items and you're kind of told like what they're used for, chest wounds and gauze and tourniquets, I think people kind of it's a lot different. I think that was kind of when I was back home, kind of more successful. And hearing stories, I think since it's sort of been going on this long, people kind of become immune to it and everything. But when you sort of hear individual stories, it's a lot different. I guess I can tell you about one of my friends who I met here. Her cousin lives in Michigan, but she was in Lviv. And her and her husband were both biology professors at one of the best, or at the best science university in Lviv. And her husband, he didn't have military service, but he signed up with the army at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, and he was out in Bakhmut for about a year and a half, and he was killed in June. And and actually, we were able to bring her husband's unit a drone this time when I came. But I think like it's just like little things. Like her husband kind of always drove. Lviv is a very European kind of small, old looking town, and you don't really need a car to drive there. Her husband was the person that was always driving, but now she's taking driving lessons because she doesn't have anybody to drive her. And they have 2 teenage sons. So I think kind of just sharing people's individual stories and knowing that all of these people they all had a life and they have family and everything. Also, another thing is because we're kind of we do all of this fundraising for gear, but we're also sort of getting more into making sure that we're helping veterans, and especially with the mental health and combat PTSD. So we've been working on connecting American organizations to Ukrainian organizations that are working on that. And so we've been, that's really interesting to me. And I want to go back to school to be a PTSD therapist. So I'll probably start in the fall. And then also just making sure that, people talk about when the war ends, but for a lot of people, it's never going to end. And one of the other things that we've been doing is at Christmas time, we had, there's another organization in Michigan called UCare that works with orphanages, and they had given us some money to get Christmas presents for children of fallen defenders. So we went shopping and got children presents and mailed them out. So just making sure that we're not forgetting about the families that are still here. But I guess to end on a semi-happier note, we have the real star of the show here, Misha. He is the kitty that we named the organization after, and Andrew brought him back from the front out east.
How do you think I got her to be my girlfriend?
You found her in a trench? Is that how you found her, Andrew?
Yes, that is. We found a very let's say unfriendly cat called Big Mama that was protecting 2 kittens, and we said, well, we just can't leave them here. So we grabbed all 3 and we brought them back to Kyiv, and we got them, healthy and fit. And the brother of Misha is with another one of my friends. And then I said, oh boy, she's really going to like this. This is better than a bundle of flowers. So I grabbed Misha here and said, hey, you love me, or do you love me? And that's how Misha's Angels was born.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Well, this is our first episode, David, as we go on this trip, and we started with 2 amazingly committed and courageous people, Andrew and Emily, and just thank you for your service and for defending democracy for all of us. Um, we look forward to seeing you in Kyiv in a few weeks. And thanks for getting us started on this. And David, you and I will be posting shorter video vignettes, probably 3 to 5 minutes along our trip. But this is our first bigger background. What is the cause that we're fundraising for, so people can understand it better and meet Misha, who's it's named for, which, once you meet Misha, you have to give. So thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you.
And stay tuned.
Yeah. Thank you for hosting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.